Hey guys, welcome to my podcast channel. My name is Victor Okendo. Everybody calls me Pete. Pete's my childhood nickname. It's a long story. People ask me all the time, especially non-Puerto Ricans usually ask me, where does Pete come from if your name is Victor? Long story. I'll get into that someday. Or obviously throughout these podcast episodes. But I wanted to do an intro an intro episode kind of thing, kind of like a pre thing before we actually do episode one. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about the podcast, what it's going to be about, and just a little bit about me, about my story. The podcast is called 10-Second Gems, and one of the main ideas is to constantly be dropping gems, right, in the podcast. I'm going to do some advice episodes kind of thing. Sometimes I'm going to have guests. Sometimes it's just going to be a one-man podcast. But before I get into, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'm going to give you my story, and there are some gems in there. Hopefully you'll be able to pull a gem or two out of that story. But one thing that I think is really important to kind of put out there before anything else is just that I'm not some guru, some advice guru. I'm not some person that has it all together or that has all the answers. And I just want to put that out there because, yes, I will give advice. I'm going to be dropping knowledge or gems or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of the stuff that I say are my thoughts. Me thinking out loud. It's not me thinking that I have all the answers, because I absolutely do not. All right. But yeah, so the podcast is going to be about a little bit of everything. I have everything lined up in terms of episodes. I've got a Hollywood producer coming in one day. I've got an audio engineer that does stuff for Pixar and video games. I got a friend of mine that fights forest fires. I'm going to do an episode with him. We're going to cover everything from life to business to entertainment business and even religion. I am a Christian. This is not a religious podcast. This is not a podcast about Christianity. We will cover and touch on those things. And you will hear my opinion on a lot of stuff, especially that's going on with the church. But just so you know, these are my opinions and my opinions only. No way, shape, or form do I think that my opinions are correct and yours are wrong. It's just this is my outlet to speak my mind, and I don't make many apologies for speaking my mind. If I'm corrected, I will absolutely make that apology public. But for the most part, this is just me talking, and yeah. So before I get into my story, I also want to tell you. So I've got an email set up for the podcast. If you have any questions, or if you would like advice on anything, or if you just want to comment on a specific podcast, or if you'd like me to bring a guest back, or maybe if you would like to be a guest, the email for the podcast is 10secondgems, all one word, at gmail.com. 10secondgems at gmail.com. We are working on the Instagram at the moment, so that will be up soon. Also, if you're on Instagram, please follow the hashtag 10secondgems. I've already got some stuff on there. I'm already speaking my mind a little bit on there. Actually, this whole podcast started because of that hashtag. So a friend of mine that I grew up with in Philly, I'm from North Philly. A friend of mine I grew up with had randomly, I've talked to him in maybe 10 years, 12 years, sends me a message, and he's like, dude, I love these little advice things that you're putting on Instagram. You should start an Instagram specifically just for that. And I was telling him, like, well, I've been thinking about hashtagging it, at least doing like a hashtag kind of thing. And so we kind of talked back and forth, and he had tossed me an idea. Oh yeah, what about hashtag blah blah? And then I said, well, what about this? And then somehow he said something about gems or something. And I was like, well, the last video was short or whatever. What if it was like 1 minute gems or 10-second gems or whatever? So he's like, yeah, 1 minute gems. And then I thought about it and I thought, you know what? 10-second gems is actually pretty dope. Looked for the hashtag, couldn't find one. So that's how that started. And then I've been wanting to start a podcast. I'm a huge fan of podcasts. I love the Joe Rogan podcast. Who doesn't, right? A lot of people do. I know some people do not. I'm a huge comedy fan, so I love a lot of my favorite comedians that I love to listen to have podcasts now. So Joey Diaz and a bunch of those guys have podcasts, and I just love listening to them in spite of how crazy they may be. So this is all inspired by some of my favorite comedians. And then I have a friend, Kevin Rosa, who started a podcast with a friend of his called the Network Podcast. And they actually flew me out to Jersey, had me on the podcast. And after I was on that podcast, I thought to myself, you know what? I got to stop playing games. I definitely want to start a podcast. So, or I'm definitely going to start a podcast. So I've been wanting to start a podcast for a long time, but due to fear and in making excuses about not having time to do it, I hadn't done it. But yeah, so I guess that's a gem right there. Listen, man, if you here's a gem. If you feel like starting a podcast, or you feel like starting some sort of company, or you want to get into real estate or whatever, what time is better than now? We're still quarantined. People still have to technically stay home. It's a good time, man, to at least take your brainchild or your baby this creative baby that you may have, whatever it is, whether it's a car tire company, a rim company, photography, whatever it is, start it, man, or at least get the plan together and execute it. That's my challenge to you. All right, I'm challenging myself. I'm talking to myself, really. I'm really talking to myself right now. But excuse me, there's a gem. All right, so there's our very first gem. So a little bit about me. I'm from North Philadelphia. I was born and raised in North Philadelphia. I was born to very young parents. My mother was 17 and my father turned 15 11 or 12 days after I was born. I always get that mixed up. I think it was 12. So my dad was super young. When I was born, my dad's family decided that it was best for them to leave Philly, and they moved to California. So for the first 5 years of my life, my dad wasn't around, and rightfully so. You know, again, he was super young. His family moved him out to California, and my mother was raising me. When I was a kid, when I was about 5 years old, I was told by my mother that we were going to live with my father. I remember that very well. I remember that very well because I remember thinking, my father, I have my father. Where's my father? Who's that? And my mother said, well, we're going to go live with your father in California. And, I was 5 years old. I don't remember a ton, but I do remember specifically getting on an airplane for the first time and being very nervous about it. I was scared. I was telling my mom I was scared. It was nighttime. It was actually super early in the morning, I'm guessing. And so anyway, I went to live. We lived with my dad for a while, and that didn't work out. So I ended up coming back to Philly. And I was basically being raised by my mother and my grandmother. My mother had she was kind of the black sheep, I guess, of my grandmother's kids, of the family. She kind of got into a lot of trouble. She had a really bad temper, and she had some issues, some addiction issues and things. So I was being raised by my mother, my very young mother, and my grandmother. Had a ton of characters growing up. I mean, this North Philly, my uncles were both boxers. A lot of my cousins were boxers. I come from a long line of boxers. The line stopped with me pretty much. And so as you can imagine, tons of characters. And yeah, so when I was a kid growing up in Philly during the crack epidemic, 2020, I think it was, or Nightline or something, did a story on my neighborhood. It was like a 5-day docu-series thing, and they called it the Badlands. And it was Ted Koppel, one of these dudes. You know what I'm saying? So that's the environment I grew up with. I grew up in the 80s during the crack epidemic. Philly was just bombarded with this situation. In that docu-series, Ted Koppel, whoever it is, I forget the other guy's name, was one of those guys. They were in my neighborhood. They were literally just maybe a quarter mile around the corner from my grandmother's house where I grew up. And the guy actually said, I watched this back a few years back, and the guy actually said that with a neighborhood like that there was no way that nothing good could come out of it. And we'll circle back to that later. But yeah, so that's the environment I grew up in. My mother eventually made some super bad decisions, and I was being raised by my grandmother, so my mother wasn't always around. And yeah, I was raised by a Pentecostal, short little Pentecostal Puerto Rican woman. We are Pentecostal. We grew up Pentecostal. My entire family is Pentecostal. And so I grew up going to church every day. Yeah, just kind of, I don't know, I'm smiling because it's weird. Like when you talk about your past, especially like this, I don't like, I'm seeing all these mental images and all these pictures and things. I got beat up a lot. I wasn't a very tough kid, especially, well, not early on in my life, but during the times that I did live with my mother was very rough on me. And I'm so thankful that she was. I wasn't thankful as a kid that she was tough on me. I'll give you a story. So when I was in elementary school, I was fourth grade, and these kids, there was some kids in this neighborhood. I went to Elkins Elementary School. I went to a bunch of different elementary schools, but fourth grade I was in Elkins, and it was somewhat of still a whitish neighborhood. The other side of Kensington and Allegheny is was it Polish? It's Fishtown is pretty much Polish and German, and our side was like the black and Puerto Rican side, and Elkins was like right on that border. So it was a group of white kids used to always kind of mess with me or whatever. One day I'm coming out of the building, and there they are. So I'm walking, and I'm like, man, I'm probably gonna get jumped here or whatever. So I walk past them. They basically walk me almost all the way to my house, and eventually I get pushed to the ground. I get up, and I'm mad. I'm crying because I'm upset, and I think I'm gonna get jumped. And this one kid's like, all right, either you fight me or we're gonna jump you. So I fight the kid. I didn't get beat up. I think it was, I don't know, it might have been pretty even, but I had like a scratch, like a nail scratch on my face. So I get home, and I'm crying, and I'm mad, I'm angry, and my mom, and this was typical of my mom, this happened several times, she basically was like, what happened? And I told her, and she's like, did you fight back? I said, yeah, I fought back. She's like, why are you crying? So I was just like, I'm mad. And she said, come on, we going to where the fight happened. So I'm like, Mom, they live on the other side of the L. She's like, come on, we going. So sure enough, we go back to the block where the fight happened. And there's the kid and two other ones. I think it was like 5, but there was the kid and like 2 other kids. And there was a old dude sitting on the porch, and as I'm walking back, he's laughing, and he's like, oh, look who's back. And he brought his mom with him. So my mom goes off on the dude on the porch for saying, oh, look who came back with his mommy. And so then she basically grabs me, and she starts talking to the kid, and she's like, y'all gonna fight again. So I'm like, oh man. So the kid didn't want to fight. My mom's like, no, you're gonna fight again, And she told me in front of everybody, if you don't hit back, I'm gonna beat your ass in front of everybody. This is typical of my mom. I'm sure anybody who grew up in the hood with tough parents, especially tough single moms, I'm pretty sure you probably went through this too. But so yeah, I ended up having to fight the kid again, and the second time I was able to get a handle on him a little bit more. I think I might have won the fight. I don't know. I think I did. I didn't get my ass kicked. I didn't get my butt whipped that day. But just to give you an example of how tough my mom was, there was another time where there was a kid named Moses that lived around the corner. I'm in 5th grade at this point. He lived around the corner, bigger kid. And man, Moses did not like me at all. And I think I know why he didn't like me. But so I'm on Moses' street. This is when I was living with my mom, and one of the rare occasions where I was living with my mom, 4th to 5th grade. And so I'm on Hope around the corner, and man, this kid Moses just decides it's time to put his hands on me. We were playing football in the street, playing tag. And he just decides it's time to tackle me hard to the ground. So he takes me to the ground, and I get up trying to be all tough. And me and Moses start fighting. I knew he was gonna kick my ass. But my mom had this policy: if somebody hits you and you can't beat them, you find something to hit them with. That was my mom's policy. So sure enough, he is beating my ass. And so I kind of run halfway down the block. He's bigger. He ain't keeping up with me very well. So I get halfway down the block, and I look, boom, I grab we used to play stickball too. Anybody that's from New York, Jersey, Philly, we used to play stickball. Kids don't play stickball no more. So somebody had left a stickball bat like on a curb. We used to take the stick and we used to put tape around it. I mean, if you from that era, you already know. So as I'm slowing down, I see the stick, and I look back, and he's still jogging toward me. I could have made it home easy, but I'm like, no, if I go home, I already know what's gonna happen. I'm gonna be on my second L. So I picked the stickball bat up, and I'm holding it. And as I'm looking at him, he picks up speed, and he's like, "Oh, you just made me mad." So he gets toward me, boom, boom, boom. I lay into him. I get him pretty good with the with the stickball bat, and I take him down. Everybody, but at this point, it's a bunch of people on the block. The drug dealers came running down the street laughing, whatever. Well, the kid's mom ends up grabbing me by my hair, and she pushes me down, and I end up, my arm gets all scraped up. So I get up and I start running home. I get home, and my mom's like, "Yo, what happened to you?" And I was just like, "Oh, I got into a fight on Hope with that kid Moses I be telling you about." So my mom is like, "All right, so what happened to your arm or whatever?" So I tell her the whole story, everything from getting beat up to grabbing the stick or whatever. So my mom's like, "Who hit you?" And I say, "It was his mom." And she's like, "You sure it was his mom?" I say, "Yeah, I was literally getting ready to walk away, and she ran up behind me, she grabbed me, she pushed me down." So we go back to Hope Street. It's me and my mom, just me and my 5 foot, I don't know, I think my mom might have been 5'6", maybe 5'7", mom. So we go back to the block. It's just me and her. The block is packed. This is not summertime. I want to say maybe it was close to the summertime, right before 5th grade started. So same year as the kid with the fight with the white boy. And so the block is lit. The block is popping. Is Hope. This is Hope Street over there in Kensington, on Kensington area in Philly. And so my mom, we get to the house, and his mom is sitting on the porch with I don't know, I think it was 3 or 4 other ladies. The drug dealers, a couple of the drug dealers, there's one drug dealer named Pete that was cool with my mom. He loved my mom. Shout out to Pete, man. I know you're probably never gonna see this, but Pete was a good dude. He was a young cat. He always used to look out for me on the street. And so Pete comes walking up behind us and he like, yo, here come Rita. He just yelling, here come Rita, while me and my mom walking down the street. A couple of drug dealers come running down the block laughing. And Pete starts yelling to Moses' mom, yo, you better get in the house. You better get in the house. So we get to the steps and my mom put one foot on the step. And she like, yo, did you hit my son, blah, blah. So the lady is yelling at my mother, telling her, oh, he hit my son with a stick, this and that, blah, blah. So my mom's like, he was beating my son up. And my son knows that if he comes home beat up and I find out that he didn't defend himself, then he's going to get his ass whooped. So that's why that happened, blah, blah. But nobody on the block was saying nothing when my son was getting beat up, right? And everybody keeping their mouth shut. And Pete is like, yo, Rita, that's true. Wasn't nobody saying nothing when they was beating Pete up. So my mom tells the lady, look, you got 60 seconds to come off the porch and you got to see me. You put your hands on my son, you got to see me. So the lady's not coming off the porch. And my mom's like, if I got to come on that porch, you get in there first, and then all of y'all getting, like, y'all can all get it to the other ladies on the porch. So one by one, the ladies start coming off the porch. And my mom eventually ends up just running up on the porch. She grabs the lady by her hair, drags her down the steps, boom, boom, boom. She beats her up pretty bad. And yeah, why am I telling you that story? Just to give you an idea of kind of some of the craziness I grew up in. And the other thing is that my mom was loved by so many people. Now, I tell you all of that to tell you that when I was 12 years old, my mother passed away. She passed away when I was 12. And I hadn't seen my father since I was 5. So it was like 7 years I hadn't seen my father. And I'm cutting the whole thing short. All right. So let me give you a little more history of my mother. My mother was loved by so many people. When my mother passed away, there was a line around the block to get into the funeral home to see her. People waited hours to get into the funeral home to see my mother. She was super beloved. She was just really tough. And I had a lot of people like that in my life growing up that were just really tough and really tough on me. I was raised by my grandmother, but when I was out on the street, the drug dealers on the block, they was the big brothers and they used to look out for me. And I just grew up in that typical hood, Philly, Jersey, New York type of world, you know what I mean, around drugs and gangsters and just madness, a lot of madness. So I lost my mother at 12. There's a lot of more stories that I'll tell in other podcasts. This is just, I don't have a lot of time. I have a certain amount of time that I have to get this done, and I'm just giving you a quick overview, okay? So, maybe a few months after my mother dies, I'm in my cousin's house. I grew up on 4th and Indiana in Philly, but shout out to the Indy Zoo. But I also grew up hanging out at my aunt's house, on my aunt's block, which was literally like a 5-minute walk on Fairhill and Cambria. That's where all my homies were. My little cousin Lewis, he was like my little brother. And so I used to always be on Fairhill. One day I was on Fairhill and I'm telling my cousin Lou, like, damn, I wonder what my dad is like. I wonder what my dad is doing. I wonder what he's like, blah, blah. And as we're talking, the phone rings. This is a true story. So we're playing Mario Brothers. We just talking. He's like, yo, I know, right? It's crazy. So somebody comes up the steps. I want to say it was my cousin Rosa. My aunt's daughter, Rosa. She's like a sister or whatever. And she's like, yo, Grandma just said your aunt called. Like your aunt, somebody, your dad's sister, somebody. So long story short, about 20 minutes later, here comes my aunt. and my grandmother, my dad's mom. They hop out the car already in tears, and there's this big reunion and all this craziness. And long story short, couple months or that night, I spoke to my dad. First time I spoke to my dad in 7 years, and then a few months later, I was in L.A. meeting my dad for the first time in 7 years. I didn't have a ton of memories of him, but I kind of remember living in California at the time. When I was 12, I kind of remember a little bit about that time. And yeah, so I met my dad, and I built a relationship with my dad over the years. I'm 41. He's 15 years older than me, so a lot of crazy gem stories there. I'll drop tons of stories on you. And yeah, so I've been through a lot. I've been through a lot in my life, and I have some gems to share. Again, I don't have all the answers, but I do feel like I can give you some good advice. I feel like I can give the world some good advice. I didn't write. I've never written a book. I don't read books, but I want to write a book. But I think this is the best way. Even better than writing a book is to do it this way. So yeah, I've built a relationship with my dad over the years. He's a great guy. So many. I mean, I could literally talk for 10 hours, but I'm trying to make this quick. My dad is the opposite of my mom. He's a really sweet guy. Probably wouldn't harm a fly. Unless you pushed him. I'm very much like that. I consider myself to be a really nice guy, but I have my mother's temper. I have my father's face and exterior, and I have my mother's interior. And throughout my life as a kid, I had to figure out how to manage that. Let's go back a little bit, back to after my mother died. I'm hopping around. I'm nervous, guys. But hopefully I'm keeping you listening to this. So when I was a kid, obviously when my mother died, I was a very angry kid, at least at first. And I really do think that that God had a plan, a really decent plan for my life. Not decent, an amazing plan for my life. And he saved me from a lot of things. I had my mother's anger. My weapons of choice were baseball bats and sharp scissors. On many occasions as a young kid, I was never in gangs or nothing like that. In Philly, we didn't have gangs. There was no Bloods, Crips, none of that. In Philly, you just had posses from the block. So everybody from Fourth and Indiana, I was from Fourth and Indy, but I chilled on Fairhill and Cambria. Fourth and Indy was a drug block. Fairhill and Cambria wasn't. So any problems, I would just, Fourth and Indy, that's who I talked to. I talked to the guys there. If I ever got chased home from anywhere, I ran to the block. As soon as I got to the corner, whoever was chasing me would turn around because it was Fourth and Indy. They call that Fourth and Indy and Third and Indy, Indiana. They call it the Indy Zoo. So use your imagination. There's even a book called Third in Indiana. I think there's a book called Third in Indiana. Yeah, and kind of breaks down that whole area too. But yeah, I was a super angry kid, and there were plenty of times where I probably could have been arrested for my reactions as an angry kid, beating people up, hitting people with baseball bats and that sort of thing. And eventually, man, my grandmother, I found out that my grandmother had gotten a little bit of money from my mother's death. And a buddy of mine across the street was selling a keyboard. So I begged my grandmother to buy it. And she bought me that keyboard. And guys, it changed my life. It completely changed my life. I started learning how to play piano by ear. I had a friend in middle school named James Buxton. James, if you're watching this, shout out to you, man. You have a building block in my story, and I thank God for you, and I'm appreciative for you, man. So me and my buddy James, I found out James was learning how to play keys by ear as well. So all through middle school, we would try to learn these Brian McKnight songs, and every day we would come into the choir room. My choir teacher's name was Alvin. what was that dude's name? First name was Alvin, Mr. Blah. I can't remember, but he would let us hang out in the choir room during lunch, and he would let us play the piano in there. So we would go in there every day, and we would, oh, James, I figured out. Remember that part in the second verse? I figured it out, and we kind of taught each other how to play, and yeah. So there's a gem right there. If you have a child if you're listening and you have a child that's kind of maybe getting himself into some trouble or maybe not quite focused, man, buy him an instrument. Have you tried that? Buy him an instrument, because thinking back on it now, I don't know where I would be if I hadn't discovered that I could learn an instrument, or that I loved an instrument. I had no idea that I wanted to be a musician until I played a keyboard for the first time. I had an uncle who was he was a boxer, and then after he retired from boxing, he was a musician. He played congas in a salsa band. He had his own salsa band, and he was one of my heroes as a kid. But he didn't pay me much attention. So I don't really call him an uncle. He's my mom's brother. But I knew that I liked music. I knew that I was very impressed by my uncle's ability to play. He would leave his congas at my grandmother's house in the conga bags downstairs in the basement, and I would sneak down there sometimes and open them up and kind of play a little bit. And for fear of him catching me, I wouldn't do it for very long. But yeah, so my grandmother bought me a keyboard. She kept me off the streets that way. And yeah, eventually found my dad, started building a relationship with him. There's so many good stories there too. All while dealing with my mother's death. I'm 41, guys. I'm still dealing with my mother's death. To be completely honest with you, still dealing with that. I'm still dealing with my mother's death. Like I said, she had a temper, but she was an amazing person. She was very well loved. And yeah, so tons of stories there. Fast forward to, I'm just jumping around, okay? I'm just introducing myself to you a little bit. And eventually you'll hear all my stories, good and bad, throughout these podcasts. Let's fast forward. So eventually, I kept playing piano. I kept getting better. And then I had an uncle. He was my aunt's husband. He was actually producing music and writing music, and he had a setup where he could actually make beats at his house. And they lived, it was probably a 45-minute walk, maybe an hour-long walk. Yeah, it's about an hour-long walk from my grandmother's house. And so anytime we would go over there, of course, I'd be praying that he would be down there, and that he would just let me sit and watch him. And eventually he ended up saying, hey, man, if you ever want to come, like on a Saturday, and you want to come in here and make beats, just come on up. So guess what I was doing? Every weekend, for as many times as he would let me. I'm not going to say it was every weekend, because it wasn't, but any weekend that I was allowed to go up there, I would walk my behind up there, and I would just go sit in that basement till he kicked me out the house, till he kicked me out. Even if he was busy, I would just go up there and watch him. And I just started loving music more, and trying to get better and learning. And we were poor. We didn't have money for piano lessons. And that's just the way it was. So I was basically teaching myself. I was self-taught. And yeah, it's cool. I'm just kind of thinking about all this stuff. That uncle ended up taking his life maybe a few years into me going over to his house all the time to play with his little beat setup he had. I was actually, oddly enough, I was in California at my dad's, and I got a call that he had taken his own life. So again, just I've dealt with tons of loss. I'm telling you that because I want you to understand that this is why I feel like I can drop some gems and give some advice. I've been through a lot in my life. Anyway, I was able to churn a an angry childhood into a music career as an adult. It's the best $100 my grandmother ever spent. I promise you that. She doesn't know it to this day, but her buying me that keyboard completely changed the course of my life. And I know for a fact it was God's plan. But I didn't graduate high school. I went to high school. I had an amazing music teacher. Sorry, guys, I'm getting goosebumps over here thinking about it. Yeah, I had a great. So I cheated my way into a high school, right? So I knew that if I went to the high school that I was zoned for, I wouldn't make it out. I knew it was going to be trouble. So me and a buddy of mine, Lewis, this big guy named Lewis that was from the neighborhood. I went to Fair Hill Elementary with him and middle school with him. He and I got a letter from Lincoln High School saying that we could come up there and take a test. And if we passed the test, we could get into the school. So we went up there, we cheated. Long story short, we used the knock system. We actually got moved around a couple of times that day because we were cheating, but I got into the high school. And then my freshman year, the music teacher there paid me no mind. In fact, told me that I wasn't fit to play piano in the band. I just wanted to play piano in the band. There's another story, again, rewinding. Before my mother died, I was at Fairhill Elementary School, and there was a violin program where they were giving violins to students in the inner city, and there was a violin teacher and all this stuff. I'm trying to do this fast because I don't have much time left, but so I applied for the program, and I was super excited. And me and a buddy of mine, Herm, from Six in Cambria, we signed up for this program. So the day comes, and I have my interview with the violin teacher. And long story short, at the end of it, he tells me that I don't have a musical ear. I was crushed. I was pretty heartbroken. He told me that I was tone deaf, and that I didn't have an ear for music. And, now that I'm thinking about it, because I'm jumping around, I mean, I'm going to have to write a book, guys. I'm going to have to write a book. Let's see how the podcast goes. But, I was crushed by it. My buddy Herm actually got the violin, and like a week later he quit. And I thought maybe that I could be on some waiting list that never existed. So I never got the violin. And, I remember telling my grandmother, like, please buy me this keyboard. And I remember thinking about that guy telling me that I had no musical ability. So anyway, my sophomore year in high school, we get a brand new music teacher, and I was a jerk to him at first because the last music teacher basically told me the same thing, that I was not musically capable of playing piano in a band, that maybe I should try trumpet. So I started playing trumpet in the band because I wanted to be in band. And then I get this music teacher, Fred Irick. If you're watching this, man, talk about building blocks in somebody's life. You have a big block in my blueprint of my life, man. I love you so much. I thank you for being a second father to me. And I'm not gonna do that because we're not gonna get emotional right now. But Fred Irick sat me down with a for those of you that don't play piano or an instrument, they have a book called a fake book or a real book, and in that book there's jazz arrangements. And so I was just learning how to play chords, because by the time I got to high school, a guy named Danny Velez that I went to church with, I was already playing keys by ear. I was already playing, but I didn't understand how to put chords together or harmonies together. I was just playing lines, da 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 da, chopsticks, all that silly stuff. And then I was learning Brian McKnight songs, but in middle school, but I still couldn't put chords together. I could play chords if I heard them, but I couldn't put them together for myself. I couldn't put progressions together. So Danny taught me what a chord meant. So like I played him a Brian McKnight song and he goes, yeah, you're playing a C. Yeah, now you're playing an A minor. Now you're playing, yeah, so you're playing chords. You just don't know the names of them. So he taught me how to read chords on a sheet, not music notes. I can't read music notes, but I can read chords. So I was just learning how to do that in high school. And then I was kind of a jerk to Mr. Irick at first. And then one day he's in the music room and I come in there and I'm like, hey man, you said you're starting a jazz band, right? And he's like, yeah, we're going to do a jazz band. Why? Do you want to play piano? And I smiled and I said, well, Mr. Blank, I'm not going to say his name. He said that I'm not capable of playing jazz piano. And he goes, well, let's find out. So he brings me a fake book and he sits it in front of me. And he's like, do you know the song? And of course I didn't know the song. So he plays it on the trumpet, plays about maybe 16 bars of it. And then he comes around to the piano and he plays a simple version of it. So while he's playing the chords, he's singing me the trumpet line that he just played. And he said, do you have it? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. That says G minor, but what's the 7? What's this F minor 11? What does that mean? I'm confused. And he said, do you know how to read chord charts? And I said, yeah, well, here's an F, right? Because I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, here's an F. Here's an F minor. And he goes, oh, okay. All right, well, let me explain that to you. So he explained to me over lunch, over an hour-long lunch, he explained to me what it meant to have 11s and a sus and all that kind of stuff in chords. Diminished all that kind. He kind of gave me a condensed version of it, and within the hour, I was pretty much playing that song with him. And the feeling of playing piano while the trumpet player was playing, that was it. I was hooked, and yeah. So I was able to turn all of that into a career where I got to travel the world. Playing piano. I have a bunch of Dove Award nominations. Dove Awards are like the Grammy version of gospel, or not gospel music, of CCM, contemporary Christian music. I've produced a bunch of records. I have music on 28 TV shows on multiple networks playing all over the world. I've played small shows with 5 people, and I've played every NBA arena in this town minus 2. So the Staples Center and Madison Square, the 2 arenas I have not played, but I've played every NBA arena aside from those twice over. I've been to Europe and back. I've played in front of 40,000 people in Europe. I'm giving you a condensed version of my story. So there's another gem, right? Don't let people tell you that you're not capable of something until you try it. But notice the word until you try it, okay? This is just a gem I want to drop on you. Let's drop a gem on you. This is 10-second gems, right? So if you have a dream or you feel like God is calling you to do something, give it a try. Don't surrender your life for it. Don't surrender your well-being for it, but give it a try. Make a plan. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And you can say, I tried. But don't let anybody tell you that you're not capable of it. Try it, and if you lose, then you lose, and you tried. And sometimes you got to lose a couple times, 3, 4 times, and keep going. That's what I did as a kid. I just kept going. There were many times in my grandmother's house when I was growing up as a kid where I would be sitting there crying my eyes out because I couldn't figure something out. My favorite piano player of all time, his name is Charlie Palmieri. And Charlie, please look him up on YouTube, Charlie Palmieri. And I would sit down and I would try to learn Charlie's songs. There was one song in particular that I tried to learn for about a year and I couldn't do it. I would literally cry, even the thought of having to sit down and try it. And eventually I got it. And it's funny because 6 months ago, during all this quarantine, I was setting up some stuff at church, and I was kind of just like, playing around on the keys, and I started playing the song, and I'm like, dude, I still remember that. Recently, I was at Ocean Way Studio here in Nashville, one of the best studios on the planet, pretty much, and I just started playing, and the first thing that came to mind were all these jazz songs that Mr. Irick had taught me from the fake book. And it's funny because I posted the video and he commented and he said, hey, didn't I teach you all those songs? And I still know them. And I don't know. Crazy stuff, man. But anyway, listen, that's a condensed version of my life, my story. I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. Hopefully I've hooked you in, and hopefully now you're like, oh yeah, I got to check this podcast out. You're going to hear tons of my stories, tons. You're going to get some great stories. My episode 1 is going to be amazing. My wife's uncle is a Hollywood producer, an old Hollywood producer guy. He worked on the A-Team. He worked on this. Now I'm talking to people my age here. Okay, he worked on Spencer for Hire. He's worked on shows with Taye Diggs and all these other people. His stories are incredible. He's got incredible stories, and I'm excited for him to come on the podcast and share those with you and drop some gems on you, of course. But guys, so these episodes are gonna air every Monday, Lord willing. I mean every other Monday. So every 2 weeks for now until I can kind of get things going. But in between me airing episodes, I'm going to be doing rant days. So, excuse me. Woo. Sorry, this is not supposed to be perfect. It's a podcast. I'll have 3 or 4 different rant episodes. They could be 10 minutes long. They could be 25 minutes long, whatever. But they'll just kind of be one man type rant episodes where I'm just kind of talking about things that are on my mind, the things that I saw. And again, those will be my opinion. They will not be facts. They will be my opinion. And it'll also be a chance for you to send emails and say, hey, this is going on. What do you think? Or, hey, do you mind giving me some advice on this? I know it's a dangerous thing to give people advice. So I'm not going to be like, you need to do this and that, but I'm just going to offer my advice, okay? Trust me, I've been through a lot in my life, guys. Hopefully I just convinced you of that. And hopefully I can help you in your journey. Okay, so the email again is 10secondgems@gmail.com. I planned on keeping this to 50 minutes, and we're at 48 minutes and 48 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up here. Guys, thank you. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, or on my podcast website, thank you, guys. Please subscribe on YouTube. Please come back. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this intro podcast. Have a good one.